Morning and welcome to XRM Virtual. We may be afternoon for you, but I appreciate your being here nonetheless. My name is Julie Yak, and I've got just a couple of announcements here for you, and then we'll jump over and let Abe share with us details about integrations with Azure Service Bus. As you heard, I am recording the meeting today. We'll post it hopefully later on today when the recording finishes processing. Watch out for that tweet that we'll send, and it will let you know when that recording has been posted. You can share that recording then with your coworkers and friends and anyone else that you know that needs to learn more about these Azure integrations. We are always looking for new speakers. This is Abe's first time presenting to our group. He is an experienced speaker, just never with us, but we love to help folks get started speaking to user groups and other events. So if this is something you're interested in, get in touch with me. I will work with you to find a topic that works for you, that works for the group. And then on the other side, if you have a topic that you'd like to hear, but you're not the presenter, let me know and I'll find a speaker. We've got another meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. It's an out-of-band meeting. It is everything you needed to know about ERP systems in 1 hour. So basically, I ran into my friend Joel at a local MVP meetup that we had here in Colorado, and I said, hey, I keep hearing from CRM folks how they need to learn more about the finance and operations side, but it's so big, it's so overpowering, and even the introductory training is 24 hours of videos. So what do we do? And he agreed to come give us a 1 hour, this is what CRM folks need to know for finance and operations just to get started. So it will help us to learn more about how it might apply to our customers and how we're implementing things. And then in February, we've got Chris talking with us about how to future-proof your configuration. If you're not familiar with Chris, he's also been on the speaker circuit for a while. He was presenting in Long Beach at the Extreme Conference recently. We work a lot with the folks over at CRMUG. Some of you may have come here from that group. We don't have a lot of overlap. We do the technical meetings here. You'll see here they're advertising for us on their site, and we advertise for them. So if you've got that need, if you've got a configurator in your organization, if you need to learn more about configuration to make you a better developer, then head on over to crmug.com and have a look at what their offerings are. And if, again, there's a meeting there that you'd like to have that you don't see coming up, let me know, and I'll let those folks know. And with that, we're going to pass off to Abe. Abe's been in Dynamics what seems like forever. He's a technical architect, and he is definitely active in the user group community. He was of great help to me at CRMUG Summit that we just had, where he helped me out in the hands-on lab area to make sure that all of the attendees had knowledgeable folks available to help them with those hands-on labs that they were doing between sessions. So Abe, with that, I'm going to pass off to you, and once I confirm that we can see you and we can hear you, I'll go back on mute.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this presentation again. My name is Abraham Saldaña, and like Julie mentioned, I have, yes, more than 10 years of experience with Microsoft Dynamics CRM, previously Dynamics CRM, now Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement. So just to give you a little bit of information about myself, I started with Dynamics CRM since version 1.2. You hit it right. I started with 1.2. It was a long time. It was like a pain on the neck.
So Abe, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I don't see your slides yet.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And while we're loading your slides, I'll remind folks, use the chat panel to ask questions of Abe. If you have general questions, I will do my best to help facilitate making sure that Abe answers those. By all means, take yourself off of mute and ask your questions as well to make sure they get asked in context. Okay, Abe, I see your slides. That's great. I'll go back on mute.
Good. For everybody that doesn't know me, that is not me. That is just a slide for the presentation. So one of the things that I want to tell everybody, my presentations are always interactive. So I love to hear your questions. I love to hear your comments. I love to hear, what you're concerned regarding what we're going to be, presenting today and what are you going to be learning. So these are going to be the topics that we're going to be checking in today. We're going to be also talking about more in detail. This is actually not a PowerPoint presentation. You will see that I have a few PowerPoint slides, but most of it is going to be actually going to the system and managing the system and making the configuration, and also looking at some source code on how to get the messages and then apply to whatever everything we need to do a real production integration with dynamic CRM. So um, one of the things that I want to mention is that not only this is going to be very interesting, I'm going to try to do everything at as much as out of the box as possible. So you will see that pretty much I'm not building any custom things, but you're actually going to see everything that is going to be out of the box on the system. So what we're going to be learning today is, how Microsoft Dynamics CRM or Dynamics 365 Customer Engage actually works with Azure Service Bus, and then the limitations, and then how do we configure this system with the SaaS keys authentication, which in this case is going to be the shared access signature. This is brand new in 2016. They actually changed the model for that, and it's a lot easier now to configure the system, and a lot better and a lot less headaches. Previously it was actually too many steps for the configuration and too many policies that you have to create. Now you will see that it's extremely simple. Also, now we have support for JSON and XML messages on this process. So we will see more in detail about that, and I will show you some of the messages, how the message is actually being generated and what are the limitations about the message. Again, this is the agenda. What are we going to be looking for? We're going to look at the fundamentals on CRM and Azure integration. The implementation patterns, the implementation patterns are going to be the queues and the topics. These are the only two that we will see. The Service Bus has a lot more features available, but we're going to be looking at only the first two, which are going to be queues and topics. And what is the difference between a queue and a topic, or a publisher subscriber pattern? Then we're going to get into the demos. The demos are going to be most of the time that we're going to be taking today. And that's going to give us like a lot more detail about how do we configure, how do we use it, and how do we can get into the details about Dynamic CRM, and then how do we will see those messages on the other side on Azure Service Bus. So we will have the way that we can configure a queue, how do we configure the service endpoints, how to send messages, and how do we process those messages. Some of the items that I'm going to be presenting are going to be some of the tools that I use most of the time. And these tools are free and available for you with the source code that you can actually download from the location that is going to be available. And I also present the resources. Again, this is actually me. This is my photo, Abe Saldana. I've been working, like I mentioned before, I worked on Dynamic CRM since version 1.2. I started on version 3.0 later on, and then I worked with Microsoft for 5 years on the public sector as an MCS. And then I worked with Microsoft on version 4, 2011, and a little bit of 2013. So after that, I become independent consultant, and now I'm working with Catapult Systems, which is the company that I'm working locally here in the Dallas, Texas area. So I'm what they call a managing consultant. So I'm actually the practice leader for Dynamic CRM on the company here in the Dallas area. So I'm actually a technical architect. I've been working on so many systems and many other things. Like Julie mentioned, I'm a speaker and volunteer with the CRM-UG. Unfortunately, this is the first time. I hope it's not going to be the only time. Looking forward to make another or more presentations, technical or other ones for the Dynamic CRM product. You can find me on LinkedIn, and then you can, I actually only have the Twitter account that I use for Dynamic CRM. Later on this year, I'm going to continue working on my branding, and that's going to be avesaldana.com or crmbus.co. That are the two brandings that I'm actually going to be looking into. One of them is going to be more specific to the CRM platform, and then the other one is going to be a little bit of a cross between personal things, the technologies, Azure, and so many other things that I do, not only for Dynamic CRM, but also Azure, PowerShell, and so many other technologies that I've been blogging and posting in so many other social media. But that's going to be incorporated into one location now. So that's me. So let's begin to the fundamentals. What is the fundamentals, and how do we use Microsoft Azure Service Bus in connection with Dynamics 365 customer engagement? So one of the best scenarios is actually, we have a third-party system, an Oracle system, an on-premises system. So we're actually coming from CRM Online, and we're trying to send message or information from CRM Online to the on-premises system that is completely isolated from us at that point. So what we do is actually we create a connection or a middleman that is going to take the information, and then we will actually send it back, or actually the third-party component or the third-party application will get that information from that middleman. So as you can see in the graphic, we have the user. It triggers a plugin in CRM Online. CRM Online send it to the service bus. The service bus is actually in a middleman. And then the third-party system, which is actually behind the firewalls on your on-premises location, they can go and pick up the message and then process that information. So these are the single scenarios that we're going to be looking right now. It's very interesting. We will see that the CRM Online can only send to the service bus. It cannot receive. We can receive to CRM Online in different other ways, but it is going to be out of the scope on this presentation. But we're going to see how we can send from CRM Online out of the box to service bus, and then from service bus actually processing the message on the third-party system or the on-premises system. So the CRM execution pipeline have a few different things. It can only work asynchronous calls. When you configure your service endpoints, you can only make asynchronous calls to the service bus. We have enabled the plugins that are Azure aware. There are also workflows, activities that we can create as a service endpoints that we can send directly to the service bus, but that's actually a custom way to do this, that have to be configured and have to be custom code, which I don't recommend it. I think it's going to be a lot more, less cost effective creating workflow activities that actually do the same thing that is out of the box with Microsoft CRM product. And then the third one, it works only for Service Bus Azure. There's been questions previously that if it actually works with AWS or any other third-party companies that have a cloud services. This is actually built only to work with Microsoft Azure solutions, and specifically with Service Bus storage. So one of the things that I want to mention to you is that probably you don't know, or you didn't have too much experience with Service Bus. Service Bus is going to be on your Azure cloud services, and that's going to be part of your subscription. So if you have your normal typical Azure services for creating VMs and things like that, Service Bus is not going to be one of those. So you have to make sure that you have the correct subscription, and then get that subscription for Service Bus. That is going to be also a different subscription than your normal creating virtual machines and other services like that. So these are the type of, now we talk about CRM, and from the CRM side, these are the services endpoints that we have available as part of the contracts that are actually inside CRM out of the box. So we have 4, and we're going to only work on 2 of them at the time. So we have the message buffer, or which is actually the message queue, and this is a permanent message buffer that it will be creating directly from CRM to Service Bus. The other one is the topic, which is a publisher-subscriber pattern. It's similar to the queue, but in this case, we have many other listeners. Just imagine sending one message to one location and then be distributed to as many subscriptions as you have underneath that topic. The one-way, it actually requires a one-way contract from CRM to the external party. The two-way has been a little bit confused on the execution. The two-way is actually similar to the one-way. It only sends a message. The one-way is kind of like a throw and forget type of pattern. The two-way is actually throw the message and it's wait to respond, but it's not good to wait to respond that the message is being processed. It's just wait to respond that the message is being received. So that's one of the biggest problems that some people think that when they actually create a two-way message for the event hosting from CRM, it will actually have a processing message back as soon as possible. But in this case, the messages are going to be, and the response is going to be only for waiting to the message to be actually received, and that's it. So these are the out-of-the-box service endpoints that we can create for Dynamics CRM. So let me continue with the limitations. Now the limitations, these are some of the limitations on CRM, and these are some of one of the limitations that you will find on the Azure Service Bus. One thing that has actually been asked many times is, can I create a custom message? Unfortunately, no, you cannot create custom message. It's actually the context of the entity that you actually configure. That's the one that's going to be sent from CRM to the Service Bus services. The problem is when somebody asks me, well, I want to create a message that is a type of like an EDI message, where I have my header, I have my footer, I have my detail, and so on. Unfortunately, that is not possible. It's only the context on the entity that you assign the service endpoint and the step. So you will see that, we can limit the amount of fields that we're going to be sending on the message, and it's going to be a custom type at that point, but it's not going to be this specific type of custom messages that a lot of people is asking for. So, if you need to send information from accounts and contacts and leads and many other entities, you have to create those endpoints and then those triggers on every single one of those entities. So that's actually one of the limitations that we have on this scenario with custom messages. Another one is that we can only send from CRM to Service Bus. We cannot receive from Service Bus to CRM. So this is one of the limitations. I think it is not a limitation. I think it's actually the way that the framework is working and the way that the situation of the architecture has been applied for. We have many other ways that we can process the message back into CRM through REST endpoints now to the web API or to the old SOAP endpoints. So there's ways that we can create information coming into CRM from all of these per systems or even from CRM on another organization. Now, I put this one, can you hear me now? This one is, if I'm sending the message to Service Bus, what do we need to process that message into our third-party system? Well, we need to have an application that will be listening to that Service Bus topic or queue or those subscriptions to actually receive the message and then process the message back into the application, or send it to any other system that have to be processing that application or that message. I'm sorry. Now, the limitation that we have on Service Bus is actually that we can only send up to 256 kilobytes on the message as a payload, okay? So be very careful about that one. We will see that there's the messages like on XML that are, in some cases extremely big. And if you actually send big fields that has, multi-lines or many lines on the entity, then it actually will take in consideration that it's going to exceed the 256K limitation. Now, you can create or you can request to extend your subscription to a 1 megabyte for your message. And in that case, you will have the capability to receive those messages that are actually exceeding 256 kilobytes. But that have to be part of your Azure subscription, that where you actually request that. There's nothing on Dynamics CRM that we can do to actually limit the size. Only thing that we can do is actually, as we can see later on in the configuration for the service endpoint and then the steps, we can limit the amount of fields that we can send in the message. And in that case, reduce the amount of the payload that we're going to be sending from one system to the another. So those are the limitations. Take those in consideration all the time when you're actually building your integrations with Dynamics CRM and also Service Bus. Service Bus has a lot more capabilities, and we can actually configure a lot more information in that. So where did I configure CRM and how easy it is now? So before, with using the previous versions on 2015 and previous other versions, we were using ACS access mode, which is the access control services, and then that process has a lot more policies that you have to configure for accessing the system. On 2016 and 2016 update 1, we got this new SaaS authentication. And the SaaS authentication is the shared access signatures, which it makes the configuration and in connection to other systems a lot easier and a lot simplified. We use the connection string, and you will see that when we create the service endpoint for the connections for CRM, we will be using only the connection string from the Azure Service Bus. As you can see on the screen right now, in the center, we have the connection, and then we have the connection string, and that's where we're going to be copying and then pass it on the service endpoint. We will see that in more detail when I go into the demo. So, I will explain a lot more in how we get all that information. But in the meantime, this is actually the way to simplify everything. You have many options on the service endpoint as the destination type. If it is a queue, it is a topic, a one-way, a two-way, and so many other things. Also, the message format. Now we have the capability to do XML, JSON, and binary or .NET binary files. So that's extremely easy to configure. Which one is going to be the one that you're going to be providing, and then generating all the configuration available for you. Okay, so let's go to the typical scenarios on service bus communication. So what is a queue and what is a topic? So a queue, it's very interesting because it's allowed the typical queuing mechanism. It's actually a broker that will receive the information, and it works in between the systems. So it will actually receive the information on the messages, keep those messages for some time or some period of time, and then discard the messages depending if the message will never be picked up or managed. Azure Service Bus has a lot more flexibility to manage and configure the messages and the queues and the topics. So you will see that you have so much flexibility on, you can configure how many minutes the message will need to be on the queue or the topic before it's actually disposed, because it's waiting for the most up-to-date information. So, you can say, I'm actually on a very high transaction environment, and I want the message to be processed in less than a minute. If it takes more than a minute, I don't want that message, and I need to discard it. And then automatically you can configure all those triggers on your service bus, and that will be actually call it the dead letter folders, where you decide, that the message is going to be sent to the dead letter folder after 1 minute if I don't process that immediately. Another thing is, sorry, sometimes you get messages that are actually damaged on the transfer, and you cannot process that message. And to avoid that the message actually locks up the system, you can actually configure how many times is this message being processed before you can throw it into the dead letter folder. Meaning that I try to process this message five times, and every time the system crashes and I cannot process this message, then automatically Service Bus will send it to the dead letter box. So you will see that you have so many other ways to configure this. The difference, now I'm going to talk a little bit more into the difference between a queue and topic. The queues are actually a single queue that will actually configure as a first in, first out. And then there are going to be only one set of messages that is going to be received at that situation or on that scenario. A topic is a publisher subscriber, meaning that you publish it once and all the subscribers will actually receive the message if they have the configuration to filter that message into that subscription. So you will see, like on my scenarios, that for my demos, I have different scenarios or different subscription with different filtering. One I have for all the messages. So that means that I'm going to get all the messages on that subscription. Another subscription that I have is only for the create records or only for the create messages. The third one that I have is only for the update messages. So I can filter if the messages are going to be for a specific entity or for a specific trigger. In this situation, I decided to go only by the triggers. I create one for all the topics, for all the messages on the topic. Another one is only for the create messages, and another one is only for the updates. You have the flexibility to create as many topics and as many subscriptions on those topics. So if you have very specific processing rules for your third-party system, this is actually the best way to generate that information. If you decide, I only want to process accounts that are brand new accounts or create new accounts on one topic for one subscription, because the system will actually manage that, and we will have an MDM system that actually will coordinate all the key change, and it actually was going to manage all that information. Then you create a subscription for that. On the other case that you say, I only want to process contact updates, because now we have to update the contact that we actually manage into our systems and through our ERPs and through our financials and things like that. So you can create another topic for that. And then the processing is going to be very specific. You don't have to do any filtering at that point. Now, if you have the old messages, then you can have to filter on that one if it is a contact, if it is an account, if it is a create, if it is an update, and so on. You will have all that information embedded into the messages, and then we'll actually have all the detail available for you. The benefit of the topic against the queue is that the topic on the subscriptions, you can filter the message as more granular as you need it. So that's one of the biggest benefits. And I went in a lot more into detail about that. This is actually the slides about, what are the features about the queue. I'm going to leave a little bit on that one. I'm not going to talk too much about this one, but I mentioned a lot of that. We can have multiple applications. This is actually one of the benefits of the queue. You can have multiple applications trying to get it to the same queue. Unfortunately, I don't recommend that, because they can be overriding each other, and then none of the messages can be actually disposed correctly. So I recommend, if you're going to use queues, try only one application at a time, use one queue at a time. So you can actually read all those messages and dispose those messages when it's needed. Okay? And compared to topics, this is actually one of the benefits, where you have multiple applications connecting to different subscriptions, and then only getting the messages that are filtered for those applications. And this is actually the best recommended situation, is where you have, the granularity that you need for those processing applications, and then give you all the flexibility that you need on that. So again, the filtering is going to be the best thing that you can actually define for your subscriptions, and then allow the topic to be more flexible for you in when you're actually processing that. And now let's do for the demo. So on the demo, we're going to have different scenarios. The first one is going to be configuring, again, the queue, and how are we going to be configuring the service bus endpoint, and then also creating the lead to be sent to the message queue when we create a message or when we update the message. Okay, so let's begin with that. Let me minimize this. And then let's go to the plugin registration tool. And let me tell you that I created, this is actually my trial organization that I created. It's a version 9. Let me show you about that one. So it's a version 9 trial that I created. So probably you know that, this is actually just plain simple and vanilla. There's no configuration. The only thing that I did is actually get sample data. Sorry. And then just what we're going to be doing is, configuring accounts, contacts, or leads. In this instance, for this scenario, we're going to create the leads. So I got and downloaded the latest and greatest SDK, which is not called SDK anymore. It's actually the developer documentation now. And then you have to use NuGet to actually download the plugin registration tool. So I have the links for that on my slides, where you can actually download the newest version for the plugin registration tool. This is version 9. So this is the latest and greatest. So you will need that one for your trials at this point. So again, I saw that there's some question, why will you choose to create multiple topics rather than multiple filters on the single topic? That's a good question. That will be actually depending on your scenarios. I think the best situation is keep one topic with multiple subscriptions, and then instead of creating multiple topics with different subscriptions or similar subscriptions on those topics. One topic, then multiple subscriptions. You can create as many subscriptions as you want. and then create the filtering as do one. And I will show you that, there's one tool that I use a lot for that, and that's going to be the Azure Service Bus Explorer. But let me create, right now I just created, right here, I created the service endpoint. And then the service endpoint is very simple to create. Let me get my my endpoint information. So I can go and create another service endpoint, and it's going to ask me if I have the connection string. So I paste the connection string in here, and then now I can configure what type of information that I want to create. So if I say it's going to be a queue, you have all these other options in here, and it's going to be JSON, and the queue is going to be, I forgot the queue name, my Q1. Okay, and then click save, and automatically we have, and because I already have another service endpoint registered, that's the reason why it's actually saying the name have to be unique. So I have the same one created with this one, so I'm gonna remove this one and I'm gonna register, so you can see that. And now we're gonna create the step for the lead. So now we go here and then says create a new step. And now we're gonna say on the create message for the lead. And then remember, one of the limitations would have to be asynchronous. If we don't put this asynchronous and we're trying to register, it actually will pop us as says only asynchronous steps can be supported on service endpoint plugins. So this is one of the limitations. Now, I always try to do on my development, I disable this option because I want to see the messages when they succeeded on my system, and then I can actually track that information. Okay. Now we talk about the limitations about the message. So this is actually where we can limit that. We're going to create an image for the post because this is actually the create. And on the post image, I always like to call it, and this is an old habit for me. I learned that since version, I don't know, 3.0, and that's how I do it all the time. So old habit. You can call it any way you want it, and you can name the alias any way you want it. This is where you limited the amount of fields that are actually going to be passing on that message. So you can select as many fields in here, the ones that you may need on the third-party system, and then only select those that you want and then to be included in the message. So at this point, I will leave everything, and then I'm just going to cancel OK, and then register the image. Now let me create another image, another step, sorry. And this is going to be for the update. And for the lead, then have to be asynchronous. And I want to keep the messages, and then I'm going to register. Same thing in this one. I can create the images. I can create the pre-image. Create the pre-image. And then on this one, I just want the pre-image. Let me say, for the account, the city, the contact, the email, and then where's the account name? Here's the account name. Question again on the chat. Can we limit the message log size? Unfortunately, no. Only you can select the many fields that you're going to be sending on the message. Unfortunately, that is not part of the configuration. So we can create as many the images with only the fields that we need on that image, and then that's going to be part of pretty much the limitation that we can have. Unfortunately, there's going to be some other configurations that need to be done on CRM, but that have to be those are being on the plans for next versions. And so far, right now we get the latest and the most simple way to connect to the systems. And I think that's going to be another thing that we will need to be taking in consideration on the next release. How big is going to be the message and how big is going to be the payload. Now, I downloaded one of the messages and I'm going to show you, this is actually when I created an account. There's actually a previous message that I sent to the system. I created the account, and this is the payload message that has been sent. As you can see, it's a lot information on it. And I selected all the fields for the account. That will be depending on your system, on your entity, how many fields you have configured on your entity, and how many fields are actually important for your third-party system. So again, be very careful on how many fields you select for the pre and the post images, and that's going to be the information that is going to be applied into the system. Okay, so now we just create that one, and we can test, the queue, and let's create a brand new record for the lead. So we go to the leads, then we create a brand new lead. And then we save the lead. Okay, now it's been saved. How do I know that it's been actually saved and it's going to be sending into the other system? It's right here. So because I changed the configuration that I don't want to delete the message, you will see that the system is going to be on system jobs. You will find that transaction in there. And when succeeded, it actually will remain in there. The process, if you don't uncheck that option for the configuration on the trigger for that plugin or that step, it actually is going to immediately delete that transaction. So right now it actually succeeded, as you can see it here, and then the record's still there. So if I didn't uncheck that option, the record for the transaction will disappear. So now I can go and test if I got that message. So I can go here, and this is actually called the Service Bus Explorer, and I have my queue here, and then as you can see, I received one message. Now I can validate the message and check the message information, and yep, that's one message that has been received right away. Okay, so that's how I configure that. Now, if I make changes or updates, this is actually where we're going to have, this job title. Then I save it and I validate the transactions. Okay, it's in progress. And it succeeded again. Now, if I go check the service bus and I refresh, now I have two messages. This one is a create. The second message is it's an update. Okay, so as you can see, I can send as many different type of messages into one queue. Now let's set the configuration for validate the subscription. So I have one subscription that I call it my test topic, and I have 3 subscription messages. So the 3 subscription messages are all messages, which are going to receive any type of messages. I don't have any default rule in this one, so meaning that 1 is equal to 1. That means true. So that means that I'm going to receive every single message. I have another subscription, like I mentioned before, that is going to be the create message. And in the create message, I have the create message, and then I have the update message. So in this ones, I have to change the filter to say, this is the request name, and I want the request name to be equal to create. So this is the way that you create the filtering for those name types. And then there's going to be also the create name or the entity logic name, which is going to be the contact, the account, and so on, depending on the entity you want. So, but this one is for the create, and I created another rule filtering for the update in this one. So as you can see, that's the update. Now I have a message that I actually did and tested. So now I'm going to delete that message. So now that one is gone. Now let me clear this one also. Now let me clear this one also. Okay. So I don't have any messages on the topics or on the topic and the subscriptions. So now let's test it. So on that one, I have right now configured for the account. So now we're going to configure another one for the contact. Let's say, let's create a new step for the create, for the contact. If I can type, okay, non-asynchronous, and I want to maintain this one. Okay, and then another one for the update on the contact. Okay, and then delete this one. And now let's create the steps, the images for this one. So I want to send the pre and the post. Okay, now let's create another image for the post. Okay, and now we are set. Okay, so now let's do, where's this? Here it is. Now let's go to contacts, create a brand new contact. Okay, and then save it. And let's validate that the message has been sent. In progress now. And it's still in progress. Okay, in the meantime, we're waiting. If there's any other questions, comments, concerns, good feedback, bad feedback? I'm going too slow, I'm going too fast. What do you think? Okay, that is succeeded. Now let's go back and let's make an update. Test job title. Then wait for that one too. Okay, it succeeded. So now we can go check in here, and now we will see we will see two messages on the all messages because we created one for the create and one for the update, and we will see one message on the create and one message for the update. Okay, so that is how we configure from CRM. Now, how do we process those messages? That's going to be the interesting part. So let me go into here, and then let's do this. Now, retrieving the message. Now, from the retrieving the message, we have, from this versions, we have a very specific configuration that was implemented. Now we are able to do the processing depending if the message is .NET binary file or JSON or XML, depending on that. And we actually retrieve the executed from the context. We get the message of the body of the message, sorry, and then we process that. That's actually one of the benefits on this version. That we need to write the listener application. So if you get this link in here, this is actually where you can actually download that message up the message listener application, and then you can apply this changes. But now you have the capability to do that. Like I mentioned before, this is actually the service bus, and this is the application that I'm using. This is the person that created the service bus infrastructure. He created this small application to actually see all the configuration on the service bus, and that's the one that I'm using. So now let's go back to look at some code and run the code. Oh my God. Okay, run the code so we can actually be able to validate that what we're doing is actually correct. We send the message. Now we need to process that message. So one of the things that we have to configure on this one, and I have two versions. One was actually the version for ACS on the same code, and then now I have a version for SAS. So the thing is, I have to configure what topic am I connecting and what subscription am I connecting. So I have the 3 subscriptions I'm here. So right now I'm using this one. Another thing that you have to do before I forget is you have to go into the configuration, and at the very bottom of the configuration, you have to change the service bus connection string, and then again copy the connection string in here that you have from your system, and that's going to be the connection string that is going to be used to connect to the message and get the messages, and then connect to the topic in the subscription. From that point on, then you can start processing the message, and then here is actually the main loop for processing the message. And one of the things that I show you is right here. This is where we have the capability to, no matter what type of business, no matter type of what message type was created, we can actually process that message. Right here is the same infrastructure that was applied for the code. If it is a binary, if it is JSON, or if it is XML, we're going to be able to process. We're going to be able to get the message as a message proc, and then from that point on, we'll be able to do that. On my logic, I also put another filtering. Even though that I'm actually getting all the updates, I want to make sure that I'm only processing the contact and then the create. So I can do a more filtering even on my code depending on the message. So now I have all the messages that I created, and then I will actually process all those. So just make sure that I have the correct, create message. Okay. So now let's run this one, and we will see how it actually will be processing. So I press enter to get all the messages. So right now I get a message, and I go stepping into it. Let me open up a little bit more of the screen. We know that we configure as a JSON, so now it's going to get the message from the JSON. Now I get all the context for all those messages and the pre and the post. And now we're going to be processing the message. And this is where I'm actually validating that is a contact or an account. And then this is actually a create. So now that this one is a create, let me run the message. Press F5. And now I get all the details about the message. Now this is actually one of the ways that you can get all the information from that message. Right now I didn't put all the information on the screen. I just put a few pieces of the information. But this is how you process that message, and then continue after that, processing any other messages that are available. So right now, again, I process the JSON, and then I go here and then validate that this is a contact, but now you can see that's a create, and it's processed. So one of the things is, you notice that I process it twice before I can actually go and finish the processing. You will see that the system will actually, if you don't have the confirmation to complete the message, if you have a peak lock, then you will only view the message. You have to make it to actually complete the message, which is not the peak lock. It's going to be the what? When we get a message, we have the two options, the peak and then receive and delete. So one of the things you have to change on your code is to receive and delete. If not, the message will reside in there, and then you will be able to see it again as many times as you process. So in this situation, I was just doing a peek, and then we need to make sure that we do a receive and delete. So when we do the message complete, it actually removes from that transaction. Okay. So this is the type of application that you create for listening and then processing your information into your third-party system or your external system from the service bus. Now you can create listener applications that actually be running on your third-party system, or you can create job schedulers that we're going to be tied up to the message topic, to the message on the topic and the subscription. So that's going to be another way to create an automation that immediately when you receive a message, it will be processed and it will be immediately sent to the system if the system is available online or in the internet. Again, these are some ways to actually process your messaging. Now, let's go back to the presentation, and I think this is the last part now. How are we on time? Yeah, we're actually good on time. So these are the resources that I have. You know, when you get into the presentation, you get the slides. These are the links where you can actually download all the information about how to configure the system. There's this one that is very interesting. You know, if you already have the system configured as an ACS, and then you want to change it or update it to an SaaS authorization, you will get all the details about here. Also, as I mentioned before, because I'm using version 9 of customer engagement, now the SDK actually disappeared, or they actually changed the model for the SDK. Now we have the developer guide, and these are the links where you can actually download all that information. So make sure to look into those. There's been a lot of changes on it, a lot of new features and functionality that's coming in the SDK. So I just got the only ones that I needed for this presentation and for the configuration. Okay, and that's it. If you have any questions, this is the good time. I have all the items that we covered today available for you. I will actually upload those later on and give it to Julie so she can be able to actually have those available if you need them.
Yep, I will put the slides for you in the folder where we put the recording. So
great, awesome.
You know, it looks like we've got Mike typing a question. We got a question from Christopher.
Good question. How do the webhooks fit into the integration? That is a good question. Actually, I'm planning on building another content presentation that actually is going to talk about webhooks, OData, Service Bus integration, and many other things that are coming in on version 9. So as soon as we get more detail about those, I will actually have a lot more information and create another presentation that I will be available and send it to CRM UG and also to Julie to present it on this group. Yes, and I understand Service Bus integration is huge. I'm trying to give you only the out of the box and then the easiest topics and queues that are available. Like, you know, one-way, two-way events and many other things are actually available too for the Service Bus. Unfortunately, because of the extensibility and then the complexity of those, I actually set it up to be out of the scope so I can have 1 hour presentation. I understand, you know, one-way and two-way pretty much they also cover 1 or 2 hours presentation, but I will actually have those later on available on my branding as part of my training and my the free training that I will be creating on YouTube, or actually the paid training that I will be creating later on. Any other question? Yep, I agree with you, with Henry, regarding that, you know, discussion group on this topic will be actually great. Yes, there's many ways, you know, I'm actually showing you the most common ones that I've been using on my career with my customers. So far, I have noticed in a few other situations or scenarios that are actually happening, but there are uncommon and they are very specific, targeted to the customer's infrastructure. I will love to get into the discussion with you on those without, you know, telling you any information about customers or anything like that. But, you know, those scenarios are actually very complex. Again, you know, the discussion will be extremely interesting, and you know, if you have it available, I would love to participate on those. I've been focusing for the past 3 years on integrations with other systems, with out of the box, you know, with custom code, with adapters, and so many other things. So I've been working not only on Service Bus, but also, you know, SSIS integration with Kingsway software, Kasi Rock, many other things like that. And then, you know, the adapters that are available, and then also applications that are available inside the CRM or the Dynamics 365 environment between, you know, that they were available previously on CRM and financials, and then the ERP systems. So, yep, anything that I can actually help the group with the discussions, I will love to be engaged with that. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
No, we've got a whole lot of thank yous happening in the chat panel, and I want to also say thank you, Abe, very much. We've been trying to get you in front of this group for a while, so I appreciate that our schedules finally worked.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to